By the way, if we flip, let's do a bit about Spirit then. Because there's like two angles on the Spirit thing. To me, it's the donk angle and then Spirit as an overall team. So on the donk angle, right, I'm going to flip it a little bit to people, which is, even though this might sound like, did you watch the Dune Part 2 Maniac? Did you watch that film, the Villeneuve one?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
All right, basically, there's a joke that they put in that I forget if it's even in the book, where basically it's a bit like the old Monty Python joke, where in the life of Brian, where it's like parody in the life of Jesus, you know, there's a bit where he sort of says like, you know, I'm not the Messiah or whatever, and then they say like, oh, he's so humble, like, oh, that proves he's the Messiah even more because he says he's not, and it's like you realise it's like a tautology, like that logic basically means they were going to say that no matter what, right? So even though it's going to sound like I'm doing that now, guys, I'm actually not. I'm trying to make a very shrewd point, which is I actually do think this was easily the worst event I've seen from Donk, and I do think actually that match against Vitality, he actually did get sunned, like he didn't live up to the billing, like the idea that this was going to be Zemu versus Donk, you know, for best player in the world, then the winner of that versus what, well, it never happened in terms of the Donk part, like Donk just didn't turn up with this game. It's quite underwhelming. Obviously, it was a big stage match. By the way, he could have probably won his team this match if he'd have turned up. I'll give the same logic I would have given as to Zemu a minute ago. But as much as he didn't play well, if that's him playing bad, and that's what a bad game looks like, this guy is unbelievably cracked out. I know people are going to go, it's such cope though. It's like, it isn't though. Guys, like this actually was like, if this is the flaw, and this isn't going to happen like every turn, it's going to happen once every 5 turn, every 3 turn, then this guy is going to, like this like battle for number 1 is on. That's why it's actually so cool to me, because Vitality has Zemu in position to get this spot again if they can be in these semis and finals. Spirit, by the way, still looks more than good enough to do it. And then obviously Monacy, even though his team's actually been a bit sus, the joke is he's the one where the team should be holding back. They've just had this run recently, so he's had the chance to do it. So actually, the actual battle for that like number 1, it could actually be the best one we've ever had, because the other ones were just Zemu and Simple. And like even when they were like, the real problem is, even though like on paper you were supposed to include Device against Simple, no one really did. Everyone was just more sort of like, is there a reason not to give it to Simple in those years? So this year you actually do have the real battle where the players themselves, this is the coolest part, the players will basically decide who gets to win it. It's not going to be from us coming up with some angle. It looks like it'll just be based on how many tournaments you get to, how many deep runs you do. But on the Spirit side, I am a tiny bit concerned about Spirit, the team though, Maniac. And it goes like this. This is why I actually do think it was so paramount for them to win that PGL Copenhagen major, because the high they were coming off after that kind of Katowice, no one cared about that RMR loss to Mouse. Like that was just, as long as you I think for RMR, as long as you qualify, no one really cares. You get him come 3-2. As long as you're like a sick team, people forget about it the second you get to the major. The reason why I think it was so important to win that major is because it's not only that they were at like the peak of how they've looked, and they're still a very good team, but mate, that like fear factor isn't there anymore. I think teams actually at that moment were scared to play them. I think if you were someone like FaZe Clan, if they get smashed like that, you looked at some of the other squads, like I think a lot of teams were looking at them like, fuck it, is this actually just the best team? Like they looked really scary. I mean, even people like Shiro looked super strong. Obviously Zontic's like that made a name for himself in Katowice. Like none of these players have been bad. Like the joke is, maybe everyone's playing at like, I don't know, 80% of that level. They're still really good. They're still obviously relevant. They're in all these tournaments. But like the fear that team's going to like dominate, see it, that has gone now. Now they're just a good team. So even though I wouldn't change any players, obviously I'd ride it out till the next major, see what happens, etc. I still think they could go on to be one of the all-time great teams. The sexiness of the story, the idea they're going to like romantically just have the first era of like a rookie squad, that's not going to happen now. So sadly that part that's waned up. So where are you at on Spirit, Maniac? Where are you at on this one?
I know you're right, but also like, didn't we just set ourselves up for failure thinking that this was a probability after what happened in Katowice? Like already Katowice in itself felt like some sci-fi book.
Oh, it was some Twilight Zone episode. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it was. We were in the upside down. Like this whole Katowice run was just like, okay, surely this stops here. Okay, surely this stops here. Actually, no, it doesn't stop.
It's why when he had those numbers in the final, and it was like, if anything, you were hoping, right, Donk's numbers in the final just wouldn't be like too bad to tank like the overall stats, and then they were like even better or whatever. It's like, I guess just no rules apply anymore. Just up is down, exactly. Like you say, like fucking hell. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, if they really had just immediately just won the major and kept on going, then what we would have just witnessed like a phenomenon never happened in Counter-Strike.
Yes,
it was just for me the question was always going to be, okay, when they actually start to hit the brakes and struggle a little bit, then what are they made of? I think this was always the question for me. If you're really being thorough with what happened to Spirit right now, you basically have a loss in against FaZe at the major with like an incredible third map that goes all the way to overtime. So sure, it hurts to lose, but also I don't think anybody's really pointing fingers. I know Zontix had a complicated game on that map 3, and it's pretty easy to pick and choose like who you attack. But as a whole, it's not like, oh, the major is a fail. They absolutely fluked their way out. No, absolutely not. Like they lost an incredible third map to FaZe. Now the game versus Vitality is a little different. It's a little different because they really did look outclassed. Although I will say, and there is something that we haven't really discussed yet in this episode, and I think is worth mentioning, is that for teams that are supposed to have a very strong map pool, and that's supposed to be their way into this best of threes, this was one of the most fluid, weird situations ever for a map pool at an Ace Tier tournament. Like, it's just never happened before. The fact that you have Dust2 being brought back in very closely to the event, and then you have Vertigo being changed so that nobody really wants to mess with Vertigo. This was basically an event with like a 5 map pool, unless you were ready for Dust2.
Yes.
So I think that in itself, it probably like threw really a wrench in the whole situation.
By the way, also probably worth pointing out in this context, to be fair, Team Spirit has looked like one of those teams that needs a lot of prep. It's actually why I personally was a critic of them calling the Vertigo bluff. I thought you should have just gone with the maps you prepped on, Yeah,
exactly. It's one of the topics we would always cover when we talk about Spirit. It's like, oh my God, they have such good executes and their retake protocols are so refined and the way they move together. Wow. This was more like the Far West. Like, this was the good, the bad, and the ugly then. It's like, let's see how this goes. So I'm ready to extend them like an olive branch in that regard. But on the donk topic, well, maybe we have a tendency to forget that he is still a very new kid on the block. Like, what kind of incredible standards are we holding him up to?
We've ruined him.
Are we doing the same to him that we did to Monacy his first year? Where like anytime Monacy would have one bad game or one bad event, we would say, absolute washed, he's a fraud, like he's been overhyped, whatever the hell. And now we see where Monacy is right now. So if I'm going to extend a little bit of tolerance towards Zaiwu and give him the time to find his marks, I mean, Donk's been here for like 2 days.
Yes.
Like what the hell? The question is not whether or not he would never have a bad series, because he did have a bad series. Like, you say, if this is the floor that's acceptable, I would say for his talent, that's below acceptable. But granted, I think it's going to be exceptional. But the question is not whether or not that was going to happen. The question is, where does he go from there? Like, this is what makes it interesting. This is what makes like actual profiles of the game become interesting. Like, hey, you showed up the next event.
Makes Cologne a lot more interesting, I'll tell you that
Oh
much.
my God, holy shit.
Yes, Cologne, good run at Cologne, yeah.
And we had like the camera shots against Vitality, and like he was slapping the desk. Like, he was visibly shook.
Yes.
Maybe this is not usual for him to actually get styled and have people just white swing on him and shit. Yeah, okay, that happened. That's fine. If people are using this series versus Vitality to say that donk was never supposed to be a great player, then they don't understand Counter-Strike. It's just, I mean, you either have an eye test to the game and you know he's exceptional, or if you really think this is the end of the hype, then he should have never been there in the first place. So my hypes and expectations around donk are still very much there. I just wonder how he's going to behave after that. Yeah, humbled a little bit. It's a good opportunity for you to reflect on like whatever emotions you were going through. You're still a kid. Most of that team is still kids.
Yes.
Like, Chopper is like basically the dad of 4 kids around him, basically, with Magix being treated as a veteran when he's like 21 or 22 or something, so extremely young anyway. So come on, like, let's give them a break. But I do agree with you. The whole like spell of, oh my God, Spirit is unbeatable. Watch out. Spirit rolled out in the tournament now. They're about to smash everybody. Well, no, we're not there anymore. But that makes the whole scene even more interesting. You have tournaments coming up, and then you have Spirit, you have FaZe, you have Vitality. Oh, who's going to win? And then obviously that's the moment G2 decide to win with the standing, which, by the way, I'm sure we could take 30 minutes on this episode to talk about it, because the implications are so juicy. But anyway, like, I think the scene in Counter-Strike in terms of players and teams right now is so tasty. Like, it's so great.
No, one thing I actually think is I'll contrast it with like, I'd say like late 2022 into 2023, the era when the notorious Huxley took over in G2 and won all those events. One of the reasons why people like me and Richard still flamed the scene is I actually thought like the top teams were kind of a bit weak at the time. Actually, everyone was like super, like, you could tell almost every team was going to make a roster move or needed to make a roster move. Here's the difference. Right now, the teams at the top have flaws. Like, there's no dominant team that's going to smash everyone. But I actually think that they're pretty fucking good, though, because the flaws are all different. Like, for example, maybe G2 has an issue with firepower or something. Well, the problem with some of the other teams is like Mouse has an issue with maybe doing it on stage in the biggest match. Like, I think, and Vitality has the Zemu thing going on. Spirit has their own inexperience. Like, if you go, FaZe Clan has won very few events. Like, if you go down the line, I actually think I'm with you, because the teams are all good and they all have star players. It just makes the scene really interesting right now. It's not actually like they're not flawed in like the crippling sense. It's just in the way that, like, give it a chance. Like, the reason why it works if you have like a slight flaw in a top team is because there's a famous saying from combat sports where they say styles make fights. Like, you don't want two players who are like identically matched in exactly the same ways, because you'll have a stalemate. You want someone where in a boxing match, for example, you want the guy where like one guy, I don't know, it's just sort of like, I don't know, uses his jab and he just does like a standard shot, and then the other guy goes for the crazy haymaker knockout or something. It's like, right, which one will win? Will one guy wear the other one down and win on points? Or will the other guy, land the knockout blow and it doesn't matter what happens to the rest of it? You want something like that where there's like a factor. In the same way, by the way, I actually do think it is great when you can match up the superstars, etc. But it's cool, isn't it, when one's like an aggressive rifle like Donk, then the other one's like, I don't know, fucking a defensive AWP or something.
To see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.